The sky is still painted with stars. Beyond the hedgerows and stone walls of the countryside, the pale hush of morning approaches. It is not yet day, and yet, it is no longer night. There is a tender in-between, a silver edge to the blackness. This is the hour before the world stirs. The hour when dew clings tightly to every blade of grass, every sprouting leaf, as if reluctant to let go of the comfort of night. In the east, the first suggestion of warmth begins to form, a barely perceptible change in the darkness, a softening. If you are quiet and very still, you can hear the faintest rustling in the hedgerow. A fox returning home. A thrush adjusting its perch. The faint exhale of the earth waking. We are in the gentle heart of England in the year of our Lord 1652. The Civil War has ended and Oliver Cromwell's rule has taken shape, though this means little in the fields and farm cottages of the countryside. In the little village of Maplehurst, tucked between rolling hills and whispering woods, time moves more slowly. And here, nestled at the edge of a sheep-dotted pasture with a mossy stone wall along its border, stands a modest cottage of timber and lime-washed wattle. The thatched roof, heavy with morning damp, slopes gently over the upper windows which are still shuttered from the night. Smoke curls faintly from the narrow chimney, a leftover sigh from yesterday's hearth fire. The world outside is quiet. Inside the hearth is still warm. The family sleeps upstairs in a loft above the main hall. A ladder leads to their sleeping quarters, simple mattresses stuffed with straw and covered with linen or wool lovingly mended. Downstairs, the air is heavy with the scent of wood smoke, old herbs, and the slow cooling of ashes. Upon the hearth rests a kettle, blackened from years of use. A few embers still glow in the heart of the ashes, like the last sighs of a dream. Slowly the house begins to wake. First there is movement near the embers. A pair of hands emerges from a heavy wool blanket. A woman's hands, practiced and calloused yet gentle. Elizabeth, the mother of the household, rises early as always. She has done so since she was a girl of 10, when her mother taught her to tend to the fire before the cocks crowed. Her breath puffs faintly in the chill of the room. The air is cold. Autumn is coming soon, though the leaves have not yet begun to turn. She wraps a shawl tightly around her shoulders and kneels by the hearth. With practiced care, she stirs the ashes, coaxing the embers. She adds kindling, dried twigs from the bundle kept in the corner, and gently blows until the flame awakens once more. The fire is small but alive. It will grow. Above her, floorboards creak faintly. One of the children has turned in their sleep. She listens for a moment, then turns back to her task. From a wooden peg by the door, she lifts a copper pot and fills it with water from the clay jug beside the hearth. Setting it over the growing flame, she begins to prepare for the day. There is no rush. Life in the 17th century is shaped by rhythm. It unfolds not in urgency but in repetition, in ritual. The rising of the sun, the tending of the fire, the feeding of animals, the rhythm of seasons and planting cycles. No alarms, no clocks, just the steady unfolding of day. Outside the window the light has shifted. The black of night is now blue. Deep, gentle blue, the color of still waters and distant hills. Birds begin to murmur from their nests. A wood pigeon coos from the far field. And then the unmistakable cry of a rooster, bold, insistent, yet strangely comforting. It has crowed every morning for years. Elizabeth opens the shutters, allowing a breeze to drift in. The light is soft and gray, slanting across the worn wooden table. On it rests a small bunch of dried lavender, a wooden bowl, and a few pebbles brought in by the children. Dust dances in the air, illuminated in the morning beam. She listens. There is a beauty in this silence, this hush. Before the hammering of tasks begins. Before the clatter of chores and small quarrels among siblings. This is her moment. Her own. In the distance, the village bell rings faintly. 6 slow tolls. The laborers will rise soon. Bakers will knead their bread. Shepherd boys will open gates. And here in this cottage the same small rituals will unfold. She begins with the oats. A wooden box near the hearth holds them, coarse, hand-rolled from last autumn's harvest. She scoops a handful into the simmering pot. The scent is earthy, familiar. She stirs slowly, carefully, humming a tune from her childhood. The kind of song passed quietly from mother to daughter, more feeling than melody. By now the fire crackles softly, no longer shy. It fills the cottage with warmth. The stones of the hearth glow amber. She adds a pinch of salt, nothing more. Footsteps overhead. A boy appears at the top of the ladder, barefoot, tousled hair rubbing sleep from his eyes. William, age 10. He yawns and descends slowly, still not fully awake. She smiles but says nothing, offering him a warm seat by the fire. He settles in without words, clutching a small piece of wool blanket. Others will follow. John, the eldest, just turned 12. Then little Margaret, barely 6. Her footsteps are always lighter, skipping, sometimes with a song. In time they gather around the table, bowls in hand. The porridge is plain, oats and water, sometimes a little honey or milk if the cow has been kind. They eat quietly, warmed by the fire and the closeness of each other. There is no hurry. The day will stretch out before them, filled with simple labors. Tending the chickens. Fetching water. Weaving or mending. Baking bread. But for now they are together, in this quiet space between sleep and sunlight. Elizabeth watches them, her heart full in a quiet way. She does not think of it as contentment, not exactly. But it is something steady. Something good. Outside the sky has shifted again. Pale pink touches the edges of the clouds. The morning is here. And so begins the day. The hearth is more than a fire. In a 17th-century English cottage, it is the heart of the home, where warmth lives, where food begins, and where stories gather in the flickering light. Without it, the cottage would be little more than cold stone and timber. With it, there is life. By the time the sun has fully crested the trees beyond the pasture, the hearth is crackling confidently. The soft flames reflect gently on the kettle's curved surface, which hisses faintly, filled now with hot water ready for steeping herbs or washing hands. Elizabeth, the mother of the house, wipes her hands on her apron and checks the shelf above the hearth. There, among bundles of drying thyme and sage, sit several wooden containers, each holding something precious. Dried rose hips. Chamomile flowers. Crushed peppermint leaves. Today, she selects marjoram and nettle, a simple infusion, meant to strengthen the body and warm the stomach. She pinches the herbs into a small linen bundle and drops it into the hot water, letting it steep. The scent is gentle, earthy, just a little sweet. Around the hearth, life unfolds in small, quiet ways. The children sit on low stools, warming their toes by the fire. John, the eldest, holds a length of string and carefully knots it, trying to remember the way his grandfather tied snares. William traces patterns in the ash with a stick, creating crooked houses and animals. Little Margaret, humming to herself, rocks a doll made of old cloth, wrapped in a bit of worn lace. Elizabeth moves with soft efficiency. She pulls down a large ceramic jar from the corner shelf, yeast kept from the last batch of bread. Beside it, a cloth-covered bowl of flour waits. This is not white flour, not finely sifted, but coarse and nutty, made from barley and spelt ground at the village mill. She mixes slowly. Water. Salt. A touch of yesterday's yeast. The dough is dense, but familiar beneath her hands. She kneads it with the rhythm of experience. Each push and fold is an act of memory. Her mother's hands, her grandmother's too, this same motion, passed through time like a lullaby. The dough is set aside to rise near the warmth of the hearth. She turns now to the next task, the mending basket. Each morning, a few moments are given to small repairs, patching a stocking, replacing a button, reinforcing a thinning seam. Clothing is not disposable. It is preserved, reworked, shared down the line. Every stitch is a small act of care. She threads a needle with flaxen thread and begins to mend the heel of John's sock. The wool is rough, but serviceable. Her fingers move slowly, rhythmically. Outside, the sunlight has begun to dance on the floorboards, catching motes of dust in golden beams. Margaret, sensing the stillness, nestles close to her mother and leans her head against her side. "Will we have honey today?" she asks softly. Elizabeth smiles. "Only a little, if the jar allows." Margaret nods solemnly, accepting this. Sweet things are rare, and never taken for granted. The honey jar, when low, is scraped with care. In the fireplace, the pot of herbal water begins to boil gently, tiny bubbles clinging to the rim. Elizabeth pours it into small wooden cups and hands them to each child. They drink slowly, their hands wrapped around the warmth. The room is bathed in firelight and morning sun. It is a small space, walls of pale daub and oak beams, ceiling low, floor uneven, but it holds comfort. On the far wall, a narrow shelf holds objects both sacred and practical. A family Bible, its leather worn thin. A wooden carving of a lamb, made by Elizabeth's father. A pewter candlestick. A dried posy of wildflowers tied with twine. These are not decorations. They are markers of a life. Outside the cottage, a breeze stirs. The wind winds softly through a narrow crack in the window frame. William rises and stuffs a twist of wool into the gap, a common, patient fix. He presses it gently until the wind hushes. The hearth continues its quiet work. Soon, it will be used again, for boiling water to scrub the floors, or to heat broth for supper. Later in the year, it will dry herbs strung on lines above the mantel. In winter, it will be the place everyone gathers close to. But now, in this early autumn light, it is simply present. Familiar. Alive. The family sits around it still. There are no distractions. No clocks ticking. No urgent schedules. Only the slow passing of morning, and the knowledge that the fire must always be tended. And so it is. Elizabeth sets a small iron trivet over the coals and begins to heat a bit of yesterday's stew for her husband, Thomas, who will return from the fields before noon. The stew is thick with carrots and barley, with bits of dried mushroom gathered in summer. It is not fancy, but it nourishes. The scent fills the cottage, smoke and thyme and comfort. As it heats, she adds a pinch more salt, then stirs with a wooden spoon whose handle has worn smooth with years of use. The children begin to tidy around the hearth. John folds the blankets. William gathers ash into the scuttle. Margaret carries the cups to the washing basin, standing on a stool to reach. Outside the cottage, birds have begun to sing in earnest. The wind rustles the thatch above. Somewhere near the henhouse, a faint clucking can be heard. Soon it will be time to gather eggs. But for now, for a few more minutes, they remain here. Together. Around the hearth. And as the flames curl upward, painting soft shadows on the walls, the day continues its slow, unfolding path. Outside the cottage, the morning has taken hold. What was once pale gray and lavender is now touched with warmth. The light has turned golden, slanting long shadows across the grass. The mist that lingered in the hollows has begun to lift, unraveling into the breeze. Insects hover in sunbeams. The earth, damp and fragrant, releases the scent of moss, turned soil and early blooming hedgerow blossoms. The day's rhythm is slow but insistent. Like a distant drumbeat, it calls the household into motion. Elizabeth wraps a linen kerchief over her hair and steps outside, a woven basket on her arm. Her bare feet meet the stone threshold, then the cool grass beyond. The earth beneath her toes is soft and uneven, scattered with early dew. A robin chirps from the fence post and she smiles at its familiar tune. The chickens have begun their chorus. Near the side of the house stands a small coop, its wooden slats silvered by weather, a patch of thatch laid across its roof to shield from rain. The hens cluck gently within, shifting their feathers, scratching in straw. A faded blue door creaks as she opens it. "Good morning, darlings," she murmurs, her voice low and kind. The hens flutter and chatter as she sprinkles a handful of grain from a sack hung nearby. The grains scatter over the ground like tiny jewels, and the birds descend, pecking with soft, rhythmic clucks. One particularly bold hen, dark-feathered and aging, struts to her feet and peers up at her as though questioning the quantity. Elizabeth chuckles and tosses her an extra bit. In the nesting box, nestled in straw, she finds 4 warm eggs. Still damp with condensation, they rest like treasures in her hand. Into the basket they go, gently placed beside a cloth and a sprig of rosemary she'd tucked in earlier. The scent of herbs mingles with the musk of feathers and straw. Across the lane, the neighbors' sheep bleat lazily as they nibble the grass. A black-faced ewe and her lamb watch with disinterested eyes. Beyond them, rolling hills stretch toward a distant grove, shrouded in early haze. This is the land of rhythm and return. Of fence lines and furrows, where each day begins not with news, but with need. The garden beckons next. Set just behind the cottage, the family's garden is not large, but it is filled with life. Raked earth rows and small stone dividers mark where vegetables grow. Rows of beans climb stakes, their curling tendrils reaching skyward like curious fingers. Carrots, their feathery tops trembling in the breeze, wait quietly below the soil. A bed of lettuces, vibrant green, glistens with dew. She kneels by the radishes. Her skirt gathers dirt as she presses a finger into the soil, loose, moist, rich. With care, she pulls up 3 plump radishes, their roots tangled, their skins blushed pink. She brushes off the soil and adds them to the basket, smiling as Margaret's small footsteps approach from behind. "Can I carry the basket?" the little girl asks, her voice still husky from sleep. Elizabeth nods and passes it down. The girl takes it with both hands, arms straining slightly. She walks slowly as if carrying something sacred. Together they move from row to row. Elizabeth points out weeds that need pulling and Margaret tugs at them earnestly. When they reach the thyme patch, the mother kneels once more and runs her hand across the tiny leaves, releasing their sharp, clean fragrance. "Smell," she says softly. Margaret leans close and inhales, her nose scrunching at the sharpness. She giggles. They work in silence for a time, the kind of silence born from companionship and repetition. It is the silence of bees among lavender, of a hoe brushing soil, of wind stirring leaves overhead. It is not empty but full, of presence, of small actions made with care. Further down the lane, the clanging of a blacksmith's hammer rings faintly. A cow lows from a nearby pasture. In the distance, a dog barks, 3 short yaps, then quiet again. John and William appear from around the barn, carrying pails. They've been to the stream, a narrow brook that runs behind the neighbor's hedgerow, to fetch fresh water. Their boots are wet and their trousers muddied at the knees. They exchange few words. John sets the pails by the door, and William pauses to swat at a fly with a willow switch. Then, without prompting, they head to the woodpile to split kindling for later. The thud of the axe is rhythmic and slow. The boys are still learning. Their swings are more careful than efficient. Inside the cottage, Thomas, the father, has returned from his early field work. His boots leave faint marks on the floor as he enters. He smells of grass and sweat and the faint smoke of morning mist. He nods to Elizabeth, exchanging no words, but a look that holds familiarity and quiet gratitude. She hands him a cup of broth and a piece of brown bread. He eats seated by the hearth, wiping his brow with a square of linen. He will return to the fields shortly, to mend a fence and check on the progress of the oats. There is no overseer here, no lord of the manor. The land is modest and partly leased, and Thomas tends it with the same steady rhythm passed down from his father. Soon after, the children return to their own tasks. John checks the traps set in the woods, mostly for rabbits, occasionally for fox. William gathers twigs and bracken for the fire, humming a tune from the church. Margaret is given the task of sweeping the floor, and she does so carefully, gathering dust into a small pile and looking pleased when her mother nods in approval. Elizabeth sets a pot of water to boil outside over a second fire built with stones and iron hooks. This is for laundry, today a few linens and a shirt stained from the previous day's butchering. She scrubs the cloths with lye soap made last month and rinses them in cold water drawn fresh from the brook. She sings softly while she scrubs. Her voice is low and unadorned, part melody, part habit. Above them, the sun has risen well into the sky. The golden light turns the garden into a painting. Bees drift lazily among the herbs. A butterfly lands on a cabbage leaf, flexing its wings. The wind stirs the linen hung on the line behind the house. These chores are not glamorous. They are not exciting. But they are the framework upon which life is built. Each act, pulling weeds, splitting kindling, fetching water, gathering eggs, is done not for wealth or glory but for continuity, for warmth, for nourishment, for another evening spent by the fire, with bread to eat and blankets to wrap around small bodies. And so the family continues their quiet labors. By late morning, the field behind the cottage has been walked, the cow checked and milked, the hens fed, the herbs watered, and the hearth tended once more. Margaret returns the egg basket, now cleaner than before. William proudly presents a bundle of dry twigs, tied with twine. John carries a snare with one small rabbit to be stewed later. And Elizabeth, after shaking the laundry once more, leaves it to dry in the sun's embrace. The sun is now high. A shadow falls across the doorstep. The wind carries a scent of hay from the far hills. And the morning, filled with humble effort and patient care, quietly folds into afternoon. Afternoon settles like a hush over the cottage and its grounds. The rush of morning chores has passed. The fire is fed, the eggs gathered, the clothes washed and hung, the children occupied. Now comes the gentle lull, when the sun is high and time itself seems to stretch out, like a cat napping in a sunbeam. Elizabeth moves slowly now, the heat of the day urging a quieter pace. Her apron still damp from washing, she makes her way again to the garden behind the house, the wicker basket once more on her arm. The garden is not large but it is generous. Everything in this space has been coaxed from the soil with patience. Each bed dug by hand. Each row planted with care. There is no hurrying nature here. Time in the garden is measured in days, in growth, in waiting for green shoots to emerge from damp soil. And now, in late summer's fullness, the garden offers its quiet bounty. The path to the garden is edged with low stones. Small tufts of moss grow between them, and the occasional violet peeks through the cracks. A single bee wobbles past her ear, its legs heavy with pollen. It hums a lazy, contented tune as it disappears into a nearby clump of lavender. Elizabeth pauses to admire a row of beans. Their stalks are tall and strong, twining up willow poles in neat spirals. She reaches out and lifts a pod between her fingers, long, green, and smooth. It is ready. She plucks one, then another, and more still. The pods fall into the basket with a quiet thump, their skins cool against her hand. The scent of the plants, green, sharp, a little bitter, clings to her fingers. Just beside the beans are the onions. Their long green shoots bend and sway in the breeze. She leans down and gently pulls one from the soil. Earth clings to its bulb and a small worm curls away from the roots. She brushes off the dirt and inspects it, firm, golden, just the right size for tonight's stew. The basket begins to fill, onions, beans, a small bunch of kale, and a handful of purple-streaked lettuce leaves. She moves slowly, savoring each step. The garden speaks softly, but if you listen you'll hear its stories, of springtime sowing, of wet summer mornings, of watching and waiting. Near the back wall of the garden is a small herb patch. Thyme, mint, chamomile, tansy, marjoram, rosemary. The air here is fragrant, heavy with the mingled scents of growth and oil. Some herbs are for flavor. Others are for healing. All are treasured. She kneels by the thyme and begins to snip a few sprigs with shears. The tiny leaves release a sharp, clean scent. She adds them to a bundle already partially dried, hanging from a hook beneath the cottage eaves. From the rosemary bush she takes only a few needles. Too much and the plant will protest. She whispers to it as she clips, a habit born of long days alone in the garden, of believing, perhaps, that plants hear kindness too. The sun has begun its descent, not yet slanting but golden now, softening. A bird flutters in the hedgerow. A distant neigh from a cart horse echoes up the lane. A few beds away, bright orange calendula flowers nod in the light. Elizabeth gathers their petals carefully. They will be dried for ointment, to soothe burns and scratches. Nature, in her quiet wisdom, always offers what is needed, if not today then tomorrow. And now the gooseberries. Their bush stands low and wide near the garden fence, thorns hidden among the leaves. The berries themselves are translucent, almost glowing, pale green, some turning slightly pink. She selects only the ripest, plucking them gently, mindful of the thorns. Gooseberries are tart, not sweet like orchard fruit, but lovely stewed with honey. A few will be added to tomorrow's porridge. The rest, if the children resist temptation, will be preserved. Her hands, now stained with dirt and leaf oils, rest a moment on her knees. She closes her eyes. Around her the garden hums. Insects buzz among the dill. A thrush trills from the ash tree near the lane. The wind carries the faintest smell of rain in the distance, though the sky is clear. Gardens, she thinks, are places of both work and worship. Here the sacred does not announce itself with trumpets or flames, but with the slow unfurling of a leaf, the sudden burst of color in a marigold, the cool give of soil beneath one's fingers. Each act, watering, weeding, harvesting, is both ordinary and holy. Margaret appears then, her curls wild from play, her dress stained with grass. "Mama, are the berries for me?" Elizabeth smiles. "You may have 3. No more." The child nods, solemn as a judge, then plucks 3 berries with tiny fingers. She pops one in her mouth and makes a face, sour but pleasing. Then she skips away, singing an invented tune. The garden is not a place of isolation. It is part of the family's daily rhythm, as vital as the hearth, as the table, as the prayers whispered at night. It feeds more than the body, it offers quiet, peace, a place to be with one's thoughts. Elizabeth turns her attention to the weeds. They grow quickly, eagerly, as though to remind her that balance is always in motion. She pulls them slowly, feeling the tug and release of roots. Dock, nettle, thistle, each one familiar. Some will be discarded. Others set aside for dyeing or remedies. With the basket now full, she rises slowly, brushing dirt from her skirt. Her knees ache, a reminder of her years and of yesterday's weeding, but she feels the pleasant weight of a task completed. The earth has been generous today. Before returning inside, she takes one last slow walk along the garden's edge. The pear tree near the fence has begun to swell with fruit. Not yet ready, but soon. She lifts one branch gently, inspecting the tiny orbs, then lets it fall. Beyond the garden, the field stretches into the golden horizon. A single cloud casts a long shadow over the hills. The world feels for a moment eternal. Back inside the cottage, the fire is low again. The children chatter over games carved into wood. Thomas prepares a net to mend. The walls smell of rosemary and bread. And Elizabeth enters with her basket, arms full of the garden's quiet gifts. She sets it down gently. Tomorrow the same. The day after again. But for today the harvest has been gathered and all is well. The sun is now high in the sky, casting a warm golden glow through the small windows of the cottage. The day has unfolded quietly so far, each task finding its place in the rhythm of life. The morning chores, the tending to the garden, the gathering of herbs and vegetables. Now, with the heat of the midday sun beginning to soften the air, Elizabeth prepares the family's midday meal. The fire in the hearth has dimmed somewhat, the embers now glowing faintly beneath a few logs. A pot of broth bubbles quietly on the stove, thickened with barley, carrots, and the last remnants of yesterday's stew. The smell of cooking fills the cottage, earthy and comforting, with the faintest hint of thyme and rosemary from the garden. The table is set simply but thoughtfully, a wooden bowl for each person, a loaf of brown bread, and a small jug of milk just fresh from the cow. A few sprigs of freshly picked herbs lie on the table, a small touch of nature to accompany the meal. Elizabeth hums quietly to herself as she stirs the pot. The sound of the spoon scraping the sides of the pot is rhythmic and soothing, a background to the gentle chatter of the children who have gathered around the table. John and William, the two eldest, are already seated, their hands resting on the table, their faces expectant. Margaret, her cheeks flushed from running and playing outside, sits cross-legged at the foot of the table, her doll resting in her lap. Elizabeth sets the pot down on a trivet in the center of the table, its contents steaming gently. She ladles the broth into bowls, careful not to spill any, and then adds a generous slice of the brown bread, still warm from the oven. The children's faces light up as they watch her, eager for their midday meal. They may be used to the simplicity of their food, but it is always something to look forward to. Thomas enters the room then, his shirt damp from the sweat of working in the fields. His boots are caked with the earth he has been tilling, and his face is flushed from the midday heat. He pauses for a moment, looking around at his family before settling into the chair at the head of the table. "I trust it smells as good as it looks?" he asks, a gentle smile tugging at his lips. Elizabeth chuckles softly, her eyes meeting his. "It always does, my dear." With that, Thomas begins to serve himself, dipping the ladle into the pot with a steady hand. The children follow suit, their hands reaching for the bread and the warm broth, eager to fill their bowls. There is no rush at the table. No hurried chatter or loud noises. The conversation flows gently, as though the meal itself is an opportunity to slow down and savor not just the food, but the presence of each other. It is the time of day when the day's work is paused, when the rhythm of the morning gives way to the stillness of afternoon. "Did you see the new lambs in the field this morning?" John asks between bites of bread, his voice soft but curious. Elizabeth nods, reaching for a hunk of butter. "I did. They were already up and about when I walked to the garden. Their mother is very protective of them. I saw one with spots on its back," William adds, his mouth full. "I think it's the prettiest." "You're right," Elizabeth replies with a smile, wiping her hands on her apron. "It does have the most beautiful coat." There is a brief pause as everyone eats, the rhythmic sound of spoons clinking against bowls and the occasional murmur of contentment filling the air. Margaret, who has been unusually quiet, suddenly looks up from her bowl. Her bright eyes are wide, and she looks at her mother with a serious expression. "Do you think the sun will come out tomorrow, Mama?" she asks, her voice full of innocent wonder. Elizabeth smiles, a soft, tender smile. She reaches across the table to stroke Margaret's hair, a gesture of affection she has made countless times before. "I think the sun will always come out, my love. It might hide behind clouds for a while, but it will always return." Margaret nods solemnly, seemingly satisfied with the answer. She takes another bite of bread, and her small face softens into a peaceful smile. As the meal progresses, the conversation drifts from one topic to another. Thomas speaks of the work he has been doing in the fields, the slow growth of the oats and barley, and the plans for next season's planting. John talks about the traps he set in the woods and the animals he hopes to catch. William, ever curious, asks Elizabeth about the herbs she has been drying and whether they will make it into the evening's stew. "I might add a few sprigs of rosemary," Elizabeth answers, dipping her spoon into the pot. "It gives the broth a bit of a fragrant flavor." Margaret, who has been contentedly eating her bread, now turns her attention to the window, where the soft afternoon light filters through the glass. She watches as a few birds flutter by, their wings catching the light in a delicate shimmer. "I wonder where they're going," she says softly, almost to herself. "They're probably heading back to their nests," Elizabeth replies. "They know it's time to rest before the evening." The conversation lulls for a moment as everyone continues to eat, each person absorbed in the quiet act of nourishing their body. There is no need for anything more than this simple moment. The food is warm, the company is familiar, and the rhythms of the day are steady. Soon the bowls are empty, the breadcrumbs swept away, and the final dregs of milk drunk. The children push their chairs back and begin to rise from the table, ready for the next part of their day. But the peace lingers. Elizabeth clears the table slowly, her movements deliberate, each action a small act of care. She wipes down the wooden surface, the sound of the cloth against the grain soft and soothing. Thomas, for his part, rises and moves to the door, pausing to glance out at the garden, the fields beyond and the distant hills. "A good meal," he says, turning back toward the room. "A day well spent." Elizabeth smiles and nods, the corners of her eyes crinkling in warmth. "It always is," she agrees. "But it's only the beginning." The house is quieter now. The midday meal has come and gone, the bowls cleaned and stacked, the crumbs swept from the table. The warmth from the hearth still lingers, though the fire has been banked low, a soft pulse of heat at the heart of the home. The sun has begun its slow journey toward the west, its rays falling long and golden across the wooden floorboards. In this hour, this gentle, unhurried hour, the pace of the day shifts once more. The pressing chores have been done. The garden has been harvested, the hens fed, the field walked. There is still work to be done, but it is of a different kind now. Quiet work, work that invites stillness, thoughtfulness, and presence. Elizabeth sits by the window in the main room, her stool pulled close to the light. A small wooden spinning wheel rests in front of her, simple, handmade, passed down from her own mother. Its surface is worn smooth by years of use, its treadle creaking softly with each motion of her foot. Outside the world hums gently. A breeze whispers through the trees. A blackbird trills from the top of the garden wall. Insects drift lazily through the air, their wings catching the late sunlight like slivers of stained glass. The rhythm of the countryside has slowed to a dreamlike pace. Elizabeth pulls a bundle of raw wool from a cloth sack at her feet. The wool is soft, slightly oily to the touch, still bearing the faint scent of the sheep it once came from. It has been washed and carded already, teased into fluffy clouds ready to be spun into thread. She takes a small tuft and begins to feed it into the wheel, her fingers nimble, her motions practiced and calm. The wheel begins to turn. Whir, creak, whir, creak. The sound is soothing, repetitive, like a lullaby whispered by wood and motion. As the wool twists and stretches, it transforms before her eyes, becoming thin, strong thread wrapped tightly onto the spindle. It is a kind of quiet magic, this alchemy of fiber and motion. Her hands guide it expertly, adjusting tension, smoothing snags, letting the thread form in even, delicate strands. Margaret sits on a rug nearby, quietly combing the hair of her cloth doll. She hums to herself, the same tune Elizabeth had sung that morning. Occasionally she glances up to watch the spinning wheel, her eyes wide as if watching something sacred. "Can I help, Mama?" she asks softly. "Not yet, my sweet," Elizabeth replies with a smile. "But soon. You'll have your own wheel one day." Margaret nods, content, and returns to her doll. The wheel continues its song. Whir, creak, whir, creak. The light from the window falls across Elizabeth's lap, warming her hands as they work. She does not rush. There is no need. The work will be finished when it is finished. In the meantime, the rhythm itself is enough. This thread will become cloth. And that cloth, in time, might become a new tunic for John, or a shawl for Margaret, or perhaps something saved for barter at the village market. But in this moment, it is only thread. Only spinning. Outside, the wind picks up ever so slightly. The curtain beside the window flutters. The scent of the herb garden drifts in, sage and lavender, clean and soft. A bee buzzes past the sill, briefly investigating the windowsill before drifting away again. From deeper in the house, the creak of a floorboard. John and William return from the orchard path, hang their cloaks on wooden pegs by the door. Their cheeks are flushed, their arms scratched from brambles. They've brought a small sack of apples, wild, imperfect but sweet. The fruit will be stewed tonight with honey and served beside bread. It is a welcome treat. Elizabeth glances up, then nods approvingly. "Good boys," she says simply. The spinning continues. Whir, creak, whir, creak. The wheel's voice is meditative, gentle. It speaks not only to the present moment, but to centuries past, echoes of women in other cottages, spinning by firelight, whispering lullabies, humming hymns. This is a lineage of quiet labor. Of hands busy while minds drift, and hearts stay tethered to the hearth. Thomas sits nearby now, repairing a leather strap used to bind hay. His knife glides slowly along the cracked edge, trimming it smooth before stitching it anew. His movements are as steady and quiet as his wife's. They don't speak, but their presence is companionable, Two people at ease in silence, shaped by years of shared seasons. The clock ticks softly in the corner. Not a grand clock, just a small wooden piece gifted by a neighbor. It ticks with the calm precision of country hours. No urgency, just rhythm. Occasionally the spinning breaks briefly. Elizabeth will tie off a full spindle, set it aside, and attach a new bundle of wool. Each transition is smooth, almost seamless. Her hands have done this for decades. Margaret has now taken to stacking apple slices in neat rows on a wooden plate. She arranges them like coins, carefully overlapping each one. It is a game, perhaps. Or perhaps just her way of taking part in the day's quiet work. The warmth of the afternoon begins to mellow. Shadows grow longer. The golden light of earlier has softened into something richer, amber, honeyed, like the last sweetness of a summer's day. Elizabeth lifts her head and watches a pair of swallows outside the window, darting and diving in play. Their wings flash against the sky. Their joy is quiet but vivid, and still the spinning wheel turns. Whir, creak, whir, creak. As the basket of thread fills, Elizabeth gently stops the wheel, removes the final spindle and stretches. Her fingers are tired, her back a little stiff. But it is a good sort of tired. The kind that comes not from haste or stress, but from a day well spent in the steady pursuit of something meaningful. She sets the spindle beside the others and folds a cloth over them to keep the dust away. Margaret looks up. Will you spin more tomorrow? Elizabeth smiles softly. Always. And she means it. Because tomorrow the wheel will turn again. And the next day. And the next. As long as there is wool, as long as there are children to clothe and evenings to fill, there will be thread. Outside, the shadows have begun to stretch toward the garden. The birds are quieter now. The wind carries the cool breath of evening. The house feels still yet full of presence, of purpose, of the soft reverence of ordinary things. Elizabeth rises slowly and draws the curtain. The light dims, but the peace lingers. Evening begins not with a shout, but with a sigh. It slips in quietly, almost imperceptibly, until the golden light fades to amber, then dusk. Outside the cottage, the birds sing slower now, their songs tinged with the weariness of the day's end. A breeze carries the scent of tilled soil, of dry grass, and the faint sweetness of ripe fruit. Inside the cottage, a calm hush has settled. The fire is built up again. Not roaring, never that, but steady, warm like a heartbeat at the center of the home. Its glow flickers along the walls, catching the grain of the timber beams and dancing softly across the floorboards. Elizabeth moves through the kitchen area with practiced grace, her footsteps light. She has done this every day for years, so many days they all begin to blend gently into one another. Not monotonous, no. Familiar. Like a melody played again and again until it becomes part of the soul. The pot she sets over the fire holds broth, enriched now with what was gathered and saved throughout the day. The rabbit John caught, now cleaned and dressed. The onions, carrots, and herbs from the garden. A few pieces of potato scrubbed clean of soil. A hint of rosemary, a bay leaf, and a little salt. The scent that rises from the pot is deep and satisfying. Not grand but whole. It is the smell of comfort. Of home. The children are quieter now, their voices softened by the approaching dark. Margaret sits by the hearth, humming softly, sewing buttons back onto her doll's dress. William reads from a worn book, mouthing the words carefully, his brow furrowed with concentration. John, now nearly a young man, sharpens a small blade by the window, the scrape of stone on steel rhythmic and slow. Thomas enters with a yawn, wiping his hands on a cloth. His face is ruddy from sun and wind, his shoulders relaxed now that the animals have been fed, the tools stowed, the barn shuttered for the night. He hangs his cloak on a wooden peg and kisses Elizabeth on the forehead, the gesture simple, automatic, deeply felt. Smells like a feast, he murmurs. It's only supper, Elizabeth replies, but her voice is warm, touched with pride. She spoons the stew into bowls, deep wooden vessels carved years ago and smoothed by countless meals. She sets them out on the table along with the bread from that morning, now sliced and spread with a little butter. The apples gathered earlier have been stewed with honey and cinnamon, now warm and fragrant in a small dish to the side. The table is plain. There is no tablecloth, no candles. Just food, family, and the low glow of firelight. But in its simplicity, it is beautiful. They sit together, the five of them. The clink of spoons and soft murmurs fill the room. There is no need for stories tonight. No great conversation. Just quiet appreciation. The kind of peace that comes from having done what needed to be done, from having shared in work and rest. Thomas breaks a piece of bread and hands it to Margaret. She smiles, dipping it into her stew, the crust soaking up the broth. John, usually reserved, speaks up. The traps by the hedgerow were empty today. But I think I saw tracks. A fox, maybe? Thomas nods. Check them again tomorrow. Take the dog with you. And mark the path better. Don't want you getting turned around if the fog comes in. Elizabeth glances out the window. The horizon is deepening to blue. The garden is still, its edges blurred by the fading light. A single star has appeared in the sky, faint, like the first thought of sleep. As they finish the meal, Elizabeth gathers the bowls gently, wiping each one with care before placing it by the washing basin. Margaret helps, her small hands eager to please. Together, they work in silence, the sound of water a soft counterpoint to the occasional creak of the floor or pop of the fire. When the dishes are done, the family lingers in the soft glow of the hearth. There is no rush to end the day. No clock ticking loudly. No pressure to do more. Thomas pulls out a carved pipe and lights it, the smell of tobacco mingling with the scent of supper and smoke. Elizabeth settles into her chair with a bundle of mending. She doesn't plan to finish it, just a few stitches to quiet the hands before bed. The children gather near the fire. William leans his head on John's shoulder, eyelids drooping. Margaret plays with her doll, now dressed anew. Occasionally she sings to it in a whisper, her voice barely rising above the crackle of the logs. Outside, the crickets begin to sing. It is a soft chorus, rising from the hedgerows, from the long grasses beyond the path. It carries through the windows and into the room, like a lullaby offered by the land itself. Thomas exhales a long plume of smoke and glances toward the door. Cooler tonight, he says. Might be frost come morning. Elizabeth nods. I'll bring the herbs in. They speak in fragments now, like people who have said all that needs saying long ago. Every word is familiar. Every silence shared. She gathers the drying herbs from their hooks above the fire. Sage, thyme, mint, still fragrant, though now crackling dry between her fingers. She wraps them in linen, labels them with tiny scraps of inked paper, and tucks them into small earthen jars. They'll be stored in the cupboard near the hearth, ready for teas and tonics through the cold months ahead. As she works, she hums a hymn, an old one, passed down from her mother. It floats softly through the room, blending with the sounds of nightfall. The children, now barely awake, are shepherded to their bedrolls. The boys share a loft above the main room, their beds tucked into warm corners beneath the eaves. Margaret sleeps in the cradle bed by the hearth, her doll tucked under one arm. Elizabeth kisses each child in turn, her hand lingering on their foreheads, brushing stray curls and smoothing blankets. Thomas douses the lantern. Only the fire remains, its glow painting the walls in golden breath. Elizabeth stands a moment longer, staring into the flames. She thinks of the day, its simplicity, its fullness, the quiet harmony of chores and mealtimes and work shared. There were no grand events. No visitors. No stories that might be written down. And yet, everything that mattered was here. Love in small gestures. Beauty in repetition. Grace in the ordinary. She turns toward her husband, and he opens the blanket for her. They sit together by the fire, shoulder to shoulder, as the last of the flames sink low. Night has come. And with it rest. The fire has burned low now, only a quiet, glowing bed of embers remains. Its flickering orange light glows faintly against the cottage walls, painting the wooden beams in long, soft shadows. The room is hushed. Even the crickets outside have quieted, their song growing sparse as the night deepens. The family has retreated into sleep, one by one, folding themselves into the gentle stillness of the hour. Above the hearth, Margaret lies curled beneath a quilt. The fire's warmth has kissed her cheeks with a faint flush. One tiny hand rests beside her face, the other clutching the faded cloth doll that now wears a clean dress. Her breath is slow, steady, barely more than a whisper. She dreams of things only children dream of: gooseberries turned to candy, chickens that talk, trees that bow low to share their fruit. Up in the loft, John and William sleep side by side. Their beds are simple straw mattresses laid on wooden planks beneath the eaves, covered in woolen blankets woven by their mother's hands. The loft is warm, close to the roof, and the scent of dry herbs drifts up through the floorboards. A low beam hangs above, which John has bumped his head on more than once, though he always forgets. Tonight, both boys sleep soundly. Their bodies, young and worn from a day of running, chores and climbing trees, are heavy with rest. William mumbles something in a dream, then rolls over, nestling deeper into the folds of his blanket. Below, the parents remain by the hearth for just a few more moments. Elizabeth leans her head against Thomas's shoulder. They do not speak, but their stillness is not silence. it is presence. A closeness made of years shared. Of children raised, of fields planted and harvested. Of hard winters survived and quiet joys collected, one by one like wildflowers in a jar. The final coals pulse once more, then begin to dim. Thomas kisses Elizabeth's forehead and rises, moving carefully across the room. He checks the door, latch tight, and lifts a wooden bar across it. It's not likely anyone would come calling in the middle of the night, but this too is part of the rhythm. A habit of care. Outside the stars shine brighter now. The sky, once painted in deep indigo, has turned a velvet black. The moon has risen. Not full tonight, but strong enough to cast a silver wash across the thatched roof and sleeping fields. In its light, the trees cast gentle shadows, and the garden appears as a silent silhouette. The animals too have fallen into their night rhythms. The hens are huddled together in their coop, feathers fluffed, beaks tucked under wings. The cow lies in the barn, her breath visible in the cool night air, slow and measured. Somewhere near the edge of the field, a fox trots silently along the hedge line, its paws soundless on the grass, its nose sniffing the breeze for signs of rabbit or vole. Even the brook behind the cottage sings a quieter song at night. Its gurgling waters, which once danced brightly in the daylight, now ripple in the shadows. The stones beneath it are cool, worn smooth by centuries of water passing by. Just like the cottage, the brook has seen many generations come and go. It asks nothing. It offers peace. Back inside, Thomas settles beside Elizabeth on their straw bed in the corner of the room. Theirs is a humble bed, a sturdy wooden frame, a mattress of stuffed wool and quilts layered for warmth. The smell of lavender clings faintly to the linens. Elizabeth always tucks a few dried sprigs inside the pillowcases. It helps with sleep, she says. And Thomas has never disagreed. She nestles beside him now, and he wraps an arm around her. Outside, the wind brushes gently against the shutters. It carries the scent of damp grass, far-off pine, and something ancient and sweet. In another season, the wind might howl or batter against the door. But not tonight. Tonight it only sighs. In the quiet that follows, the cottage becomes something else. Not just a building. Not just timber and plaster and straw. It becomes a keeper of sleep. A guardian of dreams. Each creak of the floorboard is familiar, expected. The occasional settling of the roof beams, wood adjusting to the cool of night, is a lullaby unto itself. The silence here is not emptiness. It is comfort. A gentle blanket of calm. In sleep time changes. The day's worries lose their sharpness. To-do lists vanish. The noise of the world, so loud, so persistent, recedes like the tide. What remains is softness. Memory. Breath. Elizabeth dreams of spinning wheels that turn themselves. Of wool that hums as it's spun into golden thread. Of gardens that stretch endlessly, each row of beans or carrots leading not to a fence, but to another peaceful meadow. Thomas dreams of the fields, not as work but as sanctuary. He walks them in the dream not with a hoe, but with his hands in his pockets, whistling a tune. The oats nod as he passes and the trees wave their limbs in greeting. In the loft, William dreams he's climbed the tallest tree in the woods and can see all the way to the sea. John dreams he set a trap for a fox, only to find it has left him a thank you note instead. Margaret dreams that the moon has come down to visit her, resting beside her doll and telling stories in a language made of silver. The night deepens. Insects quiet. Owls call from distant branches. Stars turn overhead, slow and steady as if in no rush at all. The entire world seems to lean inward, resting against itself. Nothing stirs. And the cottage breathes. Not in the way of lungs or living things, but in the way of places that have seen countless nights. It settles. Remembers. It watches over the sleeping forms inside with an ancient tenderness. Hours pass unnoticed. The fire, now no more than a glow, casts no light. But the warmth remains, held in the stones, the timber, the straw. In sleep the family is joined, not by touch, necessarily, but by presence. They are woven together by the stillness, the safety, the deep hush of the land around them. Somewhere far away a rooster will crow in a few hours. The eastern sky will turn lavender. A new day will begin. But not yet. For now the world sleeps. And the dreaming cottage holds its breath, as if listening for the stirrings of the next dawn.